The New York Rangers have a golden opportunity as we're well underway in the Four Nations face-off. Chris Drury continues to work the phones and could be on his way to making another shocking trade. We're also going to get into a couple players that could surprise in the second half of this NHL season. We're going to break it all down in this episode of Rangers Digest. But before we do that, a quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. About 68% of you who watch these videos are not subscribed to the channel. So if you want to stay up to date with everything that's happening with the New York Rangers, it's free. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, and shout out to the over 6,400 of you subscribed to the channel now, along for the ride on this crazy New York Rangers season. Your support has been unbelievable, and we're well on the way on the road to 7,000 subscribers now. But big news today, as of course the Four Nations face-off is well underway, and Team USA, which holds the majority of New York Rangers on it at this point compared to other teams, play their first game tonight. And we'll get to some Four Nations face-off stuff in a second, and obviously Mika Zibanejad's performance, which I thought was pretty good in a loss to Team Canada. But we're going to start with some interesting stuff and some prospect stuff, not necessarily prospect stuff, but some new players, and that is Erik Brännström, who was acquired just a little while ago, obviously in the JT Miller trade, and he scored his first goal for the Hartford Wolfpack last night, and I wanted to give this some praise. And obviously a couple other players with the Hartford Wolfpack will be going over shortly, because I do believe that they're probably going to make an impact in the second half of this NHL season. But he scores his first goal with the Hartford Wolfpack, and it was a beauty. I have to highlight this. Brett Berard, great work in the corner, digs the puck out. It's a cycle. Look at this move. Look at the spin move, backhand shelf. No big deal for your first goal with the Hartford Wolfpack. Now, obviously, you'd like to see this guy at the NHL level, but I do believe he's going to get there. And maybe this is the guy who comes in, and it's not a great option, let me just say that, especially going into the playoffs. But maybe this is the guy they're kind of trying to see if he can work his way up and maybe take Ryan Lindgren's spot for the rest of this season if they do end up moving off of Ryan Lindgren, which I think at this point is a no-brainer. I think you absolutely have to do it if you're Chris Drury, for the betterment of this team's future, to acquire some type of asset for that player at the trade deadline. But a nice first goal for Erik Brännström with the Hartford Wolfpack. And again, I'm thinking that maybe he could be a replacement there if they do not acquire any player back in a trade for Ryan Lindgren, if they do just get some assets. And another guy I wanted to highlight, and we've been talking a lot about him recently, and I think we're going to talk about him even more the second half of this season once they return from the Four Nations face-off, is prospect Brennan Othmann. He takes it up the ice himself and calls game. This was a overtime winner against the Bridgeport Islanders. He has 9 points in his last 11 games. It was a beauty 2-on-1, just ripped it far side. Great shot. And not only that, not only did he get the overtime winner, but he also tied the game. The Hartford Wolfpack were down by 1 goal heading into the final minute of play, around a minute 30 left. And net front, this is what he does. He kind of, picks his spots, and he's pretty good at it. And we've seen it at the NHL level, even with a goal he scored earlier this season. He picks his spots, right? And he had that nice breakaway against, I believe it was the Boston Bruins earlier this season. And again, picks his spots right in front of the net, and he makes it happen. So he tied the game. He gets the overtime winner, and he's been playing some really good hockey. And not only, like I mentioned, 9 points in his last 11 games, he has 7 goals in his last 9 games. I guess it's up to 8 goals in his last 9 games now, because this was obviously from the tying goal, but he got the overtime winning goal as well. So Brennan Othmann has been playing some really good hockey. I wonder if we end up seeing him at some point. I say at some point, but I wonder if we end up seeing him soon at the NHL level. I feel like he's earning his spot right now. He hasn't played a lot. A lot of people forget that. He's been injured. I talked about it in my video yesterday, where he might have been added as a sweetener to a potential deal with the Boston Bruins, which I don't think is a good idea to include him in any deal at this point. I feel like this is a guy who, take your time with your prospects. This is a thing that the Rangers have a problem with, and we've been talking about it. They cannot develop prospects. They'll trade them away for guys who are more, established at the NHL level, which is okay to a degree, right? But then you have all these crazy contracts, right? So, keep these guys down there in Hartford, continue to develop him, or them, I should say, and that's exactly what they've done with Brendan Othmann. It feels like he's going to become a pretty decent NHLer, like a good depth scoring option, and that's exactly what the Rangers could use right now, right? Like this season is kind of dried up from the top guys a little bit, so I think this is a guy who should definitely be given a shot in the second half of the season. But let me know what you think in the comments about that, because Brendan Othmann has been pretty impressive as of late since he came back from that injury. Again, he didn't play for a large chunk of the season. I think he only has 23 games played so far this year with Hartford, so didn't start the season with the Rangers. It made some sense because the lineup was really filled out. Adam Edstrom coming out of training camp looked like an absolute monster. Hasn't turned out that way. He had been playing well, through January as well. I do want to say that, but didn't really pan out that way. And then he was, relegated to the AHL, and then obviously got hurt, hasn't played much, and he came back around early January, and now he's really been picking it up, and he's been playing well. So I think we see this guy at some point very soon, and maybe Brett Berard as well, but I feel like Othmann with that bigger frame can probably make a difference in the playoffs. He could probably chip in for a goal or two here. Another thing I wanted to highlight, and this is from Steve Ellis, who does some great work with prospect podcast, covering prospects, all that good stuff. He is a great source for this stuff, and he has a great quote for newly drafted just last offseason, E.J. Emery of the New York Rangers, and he said he is going to be a top 4 defenseman, so that's a lot higher than the projection. This was a guy who's a very, we were talking about he's going to be a very defensive defenseman, a guy you could put out there in defensive zone faceoffs in the playoffs, stuff like that. That's kind of what he's going to develop into, and we were all kind of speculating maybe he's a 5th or 6th defenseman, but a really good one at that, like a guy that every team needs. But he's saying, Steve Ellis, this is, that he is going to develop into a top 4 defenseman, and he's going to be way better than most people think he is. So that is great praise there. Again, this guy is a big boy. He's a right shot defenseman. This is exactly any team in the NHL would love a player like this. And I know a lot of teams were looking to draft this guy, and he did end up going to the New York Rangers. So they got a little lucky in this way. And listen, if he does develop into a top 4 defenseman and, soon, by the time he's 21, 22, man, the Rangers have some riches there. Adam Fox still, right? On the right side, at least Braden Schneider as well. So they have some riches there on the right side, that is for sure. And I thought it was going to be Victor Mancini as well. But sometimes, you got to make these trades. And one guy I wanted to highlight too before we move on and wrap up here with the Four Nations face-off stuff is Dylan Garand. He looks like he's going to be a great option in the future. And this is an article from Vince Marcogliano. And you know what? He just has some great quotes, this guy. I love his attitude, so I just wanted to highlight this. He's a great goaltender. He's not the biggest goaltender either. He's only about 6'1". All these goaltenders nowadays are like 6'5", 6'6", right? So a little bit of a smaller guy. Has a great save percentage, right? Through December 4th to January 12th, he went 6-3 with a .953, which is absurd. Absolutely crazy stats so far this season, so just wanted to highlight that. And again, he just has a great attitude. He wants to play in the NHL more than anything, which is going to be tough for him like this season and maybe next season. Depends what happens with Jonathan Quick. But I think that he's going to be a very good option for the Rangers behind Igor Shesterkin. So the Rangers have no problems in that. A lot of people like to say that they do, and Igor is not the answer, and he's going to make too much. He's the best goalie in the NHL, right? When the team is on their game and he's on his game and he doesn't have to overthink, how bad the defense is playing, he's the best goalie in the NHL. So when you have a guy like this coming up through the pipeline, because Jonathan Quick, of course, is going to retire at some point soon, you're in a very good spot. Last thing I wanted to mention is Chris Kreider looks like he's going to be a healthy scratch for Team USA. And obviously last night we saw Mika Zibanejad with Team Sweden. He looked pretty good, had a couple scoring opportunities, almost won the game in overtime for them. Obviously, a lot of fans are having fun with it that, he's a borderline healthy scratch for the Rangers anyway, let alone Team USA. Listen, he's been dealing with an injury. It's been pretty obvious, right? But Coach Mike Sullivan went on to say that, he has a big role here. He brings a good attitude. He has that experience. So that's a big reason why they picked him to kind of come in and be that depth player for them. So that's great praise there. And if he does get into a game here, which I imagine he will, he'll probably be playing on the power play too. So we will see how that shakes up. But Team USA, their first game today, it looks like Chris Kreider will not play, but plenty of other Rangers to choose from. You got Vincent Trocheck, you got JT Miller, you got Adam Fox in there as well. Mika Zibanejad's playing, so lots of players in there to keep an eye on with some invested interest for the New York Rangers. But let me know what you think about some of the prospects. Like, I mean, he's not even a prospect at this point, right? He's like 24 years old. Erik Brännström, he could be an option if they move off of Ryan Lindgren later this year. He's a little bit smaller. I would like a bigger body in there for the playoffs, but we'll see how that shakes out. It is an interesting option. I think Brennan Othmann should definitely see some NHL time coming up here soon. I think it's way overdue, honestly. He's been playing really, really well. And let me know about Dylan Garand and what you think about the Four Nations face-off. Obviously taking up the next week or so. It should be pretty fun to see what some of these Rangers can do. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with everything New York Rangers.